So, the Internet has lost its mind. I include myself in that description. I cannot open me YouTube homepage without a flood of angry Game of Thrones hot takes, and here I am, a month late to the conversation, just adding to that deluge, and I am sorry. But sometimes you've got some feelings and you just gotta monetize them. How did this cultural landmark, one of the most popular television shows in history, critical darling and commercial success, a show that unequivocally changed the way television was made and as such a trash fire? It's not like there was a change in the creative heads. The showrunners were always the same, cast was almost uniformly the same. So like, what the hell? So this is yet another autopsy on what I think the hell happened. And for the most part, I'm going to keep this to a discussion of the show. We could get into discussions of author intentionality and adaptation, but I'm going to stop you right there because I don't care. This is an adaptation, therefore every creative decision should stand on its own, regardless of whether it was in the books or not, or how you think George or Martin is going to go with it, whatever. Because the books aren't done yet. The show is. So what you winging about? I'm not winging. Your lips are moving and you complaining about something. That swinging. Swing. The most common talking point in the wake of the finale of Game of Thrones is that the writing was bad. So with a popular thing always comes controversy, and Game of Thrones was no exception. From day one, we had hot takes about its portrayal of gender, about its portrayal of race, sexual violence, exploitation, you name it. Your mileage may vary on how much you're willing to put up with. I was willing to roll with the problematic elements, not ignore them, but accept them. But the critic of sexism and racism in media is not relevant to the discussion of bad writing. Not relevant to the when you default to stereotyping, you being lazy and thoughtless, which generally makes for bad, or at least uninteresting, writing. Dwarves have mad A's. For more on that, see the Bride episode. Fairy lives don't matter today. But at the same time, no piece of media is ever going to be ideologically pure, and it's unrealistic to expect that. Critics and fans alike have been discussing the problematic elements of Game of Thrones since the day it debuted. For some, they wore too much, and these people stopped watching. I know a lot of these people. For others, people like me, they digested it. Yep, Sansa's getting raped and Theon has to watch. But we accepted it and continued to watch because, hey, surely this is leading up to something riveting. Or at least poignant. It's not like critic of Game of Thrones is anything new, but it's different now. Before it was about, like, how the thing is problematic, or when is it okay to have a rape scene. Now the discussion is more about, like, structure and planting and payoff and character development and screenwriting and audience expectations and subverting expectations. Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, Lord of Highgarden, Lord Paramount of the Reach and Master of Coin. But there's more to it than that. In fan culture in general, especially for a long-running, beloved series like Game of Thrones, we may eventually run into the Alio, long, you mama, mama, which might make you defend a thing way longer than you should have. Which way, way longer you. Hey, with you, long After all, you've watched and rewatched all of the seasons multiple times. You have a dedicated Twitter account just for live tweeting Game of Thrones. Yeah, okay. Everyone can fast travel all of a sudden when distance was a huge tactical consideration in early seasons, but whatever, it's fine. I am fine. I'm sure this is because the story needs to head somewhere important. Season 7 wasn't bad. They were just building up to something cool. Give them a chance. What I hear really often, probably even more often than I don't watch the show, is I stopped watching the show, usually around season 5 when it really started to go off the rails. But either way, don't worry. We are going to do a quick recap for the benefit of the people who stopped watching the show, who never watched the show, and probably the people who everyone needs a quick recap anyway. And by quick, I mean about half the runtime of this video. And I'm also about to steal a lot of jokes from Game of Thrones, so sorry Jonathan Van Ness, you read just too difficult not to steal from. Strap in. Season 1, basically a murder mystery surrounding the line of succession for the Iron Throne after the last Hand of the King dies. Hand of the King is basically the Grand Vizier, let's say. She says John Arryn was murdered. Episode 1 ends with a child witnessing some incest, and Prince Charming from Shrek 2, aka Brother D, pushing the child out of a window, presumably to kill him, but he fails. The king asks Sean Bean to be the new Hand of the King after the old one dies mysteriously, so he goes to King's Landing with his 2 daughters. He engages daughter Sansa to the evil prince. She's thrilled. But eventually Sean Bean discovers that the prince is the incest bastard of Lena Headey and Brother D, and not the legitimate son of the king, but Bobby Baldies. Sean Bean gets beheaded, and a big old war begins. Sean Bean's people fighting for independence, and everyone else fighting for the throne. People fighting for Indian. Every and also Lord Life Alert over here is like, hey, I'm in the war too, but nobody cares. Daughter Sansa becomes a captive, other daughter Arya escaped and is angry. Meanwhile, across the sea, the deposed king's daughter Daenerys gets married off to this guy and raped. But then her husband learns to respect her, and it's fine, but oh no, he's dead. But then she gets some dragons, and up north Jon Snow discovers some ice zombies. And to big ol' war for succession, Bobby has 2 brothers, plus inbred bastard king, plus Sean Bean's son, and also Lord of the No One Cares Islands is like, hey, in the war too, but nobody cares. Ending in a big battle led by Peter Dinklage. Evil inbred bastard king side wins, but Charles Dance is the real power behind the throne, and also the best character in television history. Do not at me justice. Meanwhile, Sean Bean's people are winning the war for independence, and Sean Bean Jr. is supposed to marry Lord Lifelord's daughter, but then he marries Ina Chaplin instead. Fun fact, that's Charlie Chaplin's great-granddaughter. Up north, more zombies. Season 3, no one is grateful to Peter Dinklage for his role in the big battle. Well, he gets to be Secretary of the Treasury anyway. Arias is still angry. Sansa is no longer a evil inbred bastard king's fiance. Natalie Dormer is. Arya is kidnapped by this guy. Called the Hound View. To worry, he's great. Brother D had a genuinely wonderful redemption arc with Captain Phasma. Seriously, it's some of the best television. Well, all those songs you say this Sean Bean Jr.'s campaign is no longer going so well. They planned to wed a different lord to Lord Lifelord's daughter that Sean Bean Jr. was supposed to marry, but instead the wedding ends in a massacre and the whole family is slaughtered. This is the infamous Red Wedding. The war for northern independence is over. Across the sea, Daenerys has been using those dragons to liberate a bunch of slaves. Season ends with her big white savior moment. Season fee. Evil inbred bastard, king is poised Ben farewell. Area. Stravel companion the Hound loses in battle to Captain Phasma. She escapes him and decides to leave the country to go to assassin school. Up north there, a battle between these people, who are trying to escape the zombies, and the border patrol Jon Snow is a part of. His love interests. Daenerys conquers another slave city and decides to rule it instead of coming to Westeros. Child who was pushed out of the window in season 1. He's like learning omniscient mind powers from Max von Sydow. Season 6. The real they were very well. You do well. You well. That probably do business and do so you well. They are Bow zero zero bow. The zizi zero zero well. The zizio will so. The will so. The will. The will bow. The zero do so use so well. Bow deal will. Bow bow you. Bow will. How will you so? How will You've known Sansa since she was a girl. Now watch her become a woman. So, here is where we pretty much completely run out of books to adapt. Season 6. Jon Snow gets resurrected by the woman who talked Bobby Ben's brother into burning his daughter alive. Daenerys is captured by the people she married into in season 1 and is forced into captivity with the other Cull widows, but manages to woe them all by murdering all of their kings with fire. But she herself is immune to being set on fire, which means she's the Cull now because that's how the society works. So she reunites with her dragons and manages to do 1-2 punch of liberating Meereen from the processes. Boujous, bouzouzouzou, bo, 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 bouzou, bo, bo, boo, bo, zoo, bo, bow, bow, zoo, bow, 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 boo, bow, 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 you, bow, you, bow, you, zoo, well, we well, you, well, well, you, well, well, you, bow, you, bow, bow, you, well, well, oh, oh, you, boo, you, bio, you, bio, boo, you, bo, you, bio, boo, bio, well, you, bio, you, bio, bio, you, bio, boo, you, boo, you, bo, you, bo, bio, you, bo, bio, Lord of the No One Cares Island gets thrown off a bridge by Hot Topic Pirate, the worst character in the show, or possibly any show. Arya murders the Theo, how Theo, Pardon to pension to Tell you well Theo well as you well we will do go do how we do well how you tell do well how Oh, and Cersei blows up the Vatican, wipes out the religious extremists and her adversaries in the aristocracy, and parks herself at the balcony drinking wine, where she will stay for the next 2 seasons. But not before her last child kills himself. Ba, kills, kills. Season 7. Okay, it's about to get really dumb. It's a pretty song. I've never heard it before. It's a new one. Daenerys and Jon Snow have a meet cute. I mean no offense, your grace, but I don't know you. In the time since he's met me he's refused to call me queen, he's refused to bow, and now he's calling me a child. I believe he's calling all of his children. Figure of speech. But they spend most of the season faffing around, whether Jon Snow will bend the knee on behalf of the North after he helps Dany take the throne, debate about whether or not to fight the White Walkers or go after Cersei first. Daenerys battles the Lannisters a bit, Jon Snow and Daenerys. And then, okay, this is where it gets really dumb. All right, so everyone is like, hey, the big existential threat is these zombies. How do we convince Cersei to stop fighting us so we can deal with the existential zombie threat? I know. Let's send the Magnificent Seven north of the wall to get a sample zombie. So they do that, and it is the dumbest thing, but you, like me, are willing to give these showrunners the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh boy, they re just doing this dumb thing to get to the good stuff. So they get stuck, and Bobby bastard son has to go do chariots of fire and send a note to Daenerys to please come save us, which she does, risking her life to do so, but loses a goddamn dragon in the process. But whatever, she saves their asses. And it is here, only after she risked her life and lost a goddamn dragon, that Jon is like, okay, I will bend the knee, and Daenerys is like, okay, well, I already ate some humble pea to save you, so I hope I am worthy of this, because I know this is a big deal, not only for you, but, for humanity to, survive. So then they fast travel to King's Landing and show Cersei the zombie, and they like, trust us, I know this is just one. But there's a lot of these, and Cersei's like, okay, truce. And also, I will send soldiers to help you fight the zombies. But guess what? She's lying. You pledged to our forces to fight our coming in. I say whatever I need to say to ensure the survival of our house. And it is only then that Brother D is like, I think I've had enough of your conniving and evil and blowing up St. Peter's Basilica. So this whole stupid subplot was not only a total waste of time, but they lost their resurrection expert and gave the Night King a goddamn dragon in the process. Go team. Season 8. Episode 1. Everyone arrives at Winterfell. Cersei fucks Hot Topic pirate. The North is racist. Iguus. Episode 2. Zombies are coming. Oh no. A lot of dialogue basically reads like a big send-off to all our favorite characters. This will go down in history as the last decent episode of Game of Thrones, and also a massive waste of time that gets totally shat upon later. Oh, it also turns out that Jon Snow is not a bastard, but is in fact the rightful heir to the throne. My real name is Aegon Targaryen. And also Daenerys' nephew, Episode 3. The Big Battle, the biggest battle, which almost all of the major characters survive, and is resolved when Arya stabs the main iced zombie, the Night King, with a special blade, and then they do the fantasy trope thing of, you killed the main one, the eye of Sauron is exploded, so all of the orcs are dead now. So yeah. So that's the end of that. Iguus. No more Weiss zombies, really. And we still have 3 episodes to go, and they all 90 minutes each. Oh good. Episode 4. I want time to head south and conquer Cersei. Only on the way Hot Topic pirate shoots one of those indestructible dragons out of the sky with 2,000,000-to-1 shots from a mile away, which the dragons did not see. Also somehow they captured Daenerys, Gal Paul, but no one else. And guess what happens to her? Yep. Also everyone kind of wants to do some treason on Daenerys for some reason, even though she has by this point done nothing wrong. If you consider it, the best ruler might be someone who doesn't want to rule. We rediscussing treason. She's like a literal war hero, but Lord Dr. Evil is like, I don't know. I was supporting her for like half of the entire show, but I got a hunch. He's temperate and measured. He's a man, which makes him more appealing to the lords of Westeros. Episode 5, Kill Me, time to invade King's Landing, but not before burning Lord Dr. Evil alive, because he's doing some treason. The invasion succeeds, and it is absurdly one-sided and easy. Turns out it does not matter at all that Daenerys lost half her forces or 2 of her dragons. They invade this city in like 90 seconds. And Tyrion's like, okay, when they ring the bells. Ringing the bells. Ring all the bells. Ring the bells. Hear the bells ring. If the city surrenders, they will ring the bells and raise the gates. Ivy always hated the bells. They ring for horror. A dead king, a city under siege. If they re-welcoming the new king. Ivy never known bells to mean surrender. If the city surrenders, they will ring the bells and raise the gates. And then the bells ring and then Daenerys is like, no, I think I'm going to go do some war crimes. And then like does a 9 minus 11 times 100. 9 minus 11 times 100. Jesus. That's, yes. 9 minus 11 times 100. Episode 6. I long for death. Triumph of the will shots all around. Dany does her big fascism speech in scary foreign language and nazy clothes. The only non-white characters left in the show were the people who are really into it. Tyrion's like, well, the madness has taken her. We should probably put her down like old Yeller. And Jon Snow, who has done nothing all season but say she's me queen, is like, no. But then he goes and puts her down like old Yeller. Her one surviving dragon in a fit of rage burns not the person responsible for her murder, but the symbolism. And then he flees away with her corpse. There is a trial in which the prisoner is allowed to nominate the new king, which no one has discussed in the intervening months, apparently, and who has a better story than Bran the Broken. And the omniscient guy ends up on the throne, and we get our John Who's ending where the Kinslayer and the Queenslayer just gets to go up north to Snowchella. And all of these people whose god queen has been murdered by this good guy are like, well, okay, I guess we will agree to disagree. And birthright monarchy is over. We have aristocratic oligarchy now instead, which is totally better. The end. So the ending was, it was bad. It was quite bad. But the ending was, in fairness, foreshadowed by other things being bad. So it's not original of me to suggest that Game of Thrones took a sharp div in quality after season 4. Some have blamed that on the show running out of source material. Others have said as much as the lack of interesting new characters, as all your faves were rapidly dying off, which they weren't really in the books. Whatever, I'm not here for that. So what really changed? Well, as I see it, there were 2 main storytelling component shifts. One, that characters, let's take for instance Tyrion, who are defined by their intelligence and ability to read the writing on the wall as far as Westerosi politics go. My brother has his sword, and I have me mind, and a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. Suddenly had to take a whole bunch of stupid pills in order for the plot to get where it needed to be. And number 2, where in earlier seasons the plot was highly motivated by the social trends of its fictional world, see the rise in religious extremism in season 5, the show completely opted to ignore them in later seasons because it was simply inconvenient to the plot. Writer and researcher Zeynep Tufekci wrote a blog entry for Scientific American in which she posited that this shift lay in the fact that the first few seasons were dominated by sociologically driven storytelling, i.e. characters responding to a broad physical and social institution, and that the latter seasons were driven by psychologically driven storytelling, as in driven by the characters themselves, and therefore were more in line with typical Hollywood storytelling. I half agree with this. The show's plot and point of view has always been extremely character-driven, and always extremely in line with Hollywood storytelling in that way. The plot is driven by a few powerful people trying to figure out how best to manipulate the society they lived in to their will. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or UD. But I will agree that earlier seasons had the main characters making decisions less based on personal whims and more in response to social trends, be it war, politics, religion, and so on. But really where things fall apart can be traced to one underlying main problem. The showrunners had a destination in mind and a set length of time to get there, meaning they had to bend the character actions and world around the destination rather than allowing the characters and the world to reach the destination organically. But the problem is the characters they wrote kind of developed a life of their own, and the characters in the show are not the same characters as the characters in the books. Some see this clusterfuck as a problem of having a planned ending, although I personally think you always need to have a good idea of where you're going in a series. It's just that whenever you working towards an ending, you kind of have to accept that you might not get there the way you think you will, or in how long you think it will take. Right, buddy. These things take time to write. They re 1,500 pages long. Some people can't even read them. So before we really get into where we got, first let's talk about how we got here. So stop me if you've heard this about Game of Thrones. It's fantasy for people who don't like fantasy. This was a popular selling point in the press back in the show's first few seasons, and given the different landscape of the time, it's easy to see why. Fantasy did well in film, television not so much. When Game of Thrones debuted, prestige soprano-style television that happened to also be genre fiction was mostly non-existent and or relegated to cable networks like Sci-Fi, then called the Sci-Fi Channel. It was the kind of thing that had a cult following on LiveJournal, not the kind of thing your cousin Brian, who still tailgates at Penn State despite having graduated a decade ago, would have any interest in discussing at the family reunion. This dichotomy is, of course, complete nonsense. There isn't anything appreciably non-fantasy about A Song of Ice and Fire that sets it apart from the rest of the genre, but telling cousin Brian that in 2010. But only nerds appreciate that kind of nuance. Lightning bolt. Lightning bolt. So, in order for a fantasy show to be worth the time and interest of non-genre fans on a premium subscription channel, it can't just be regular fantasy. With its, wizards of great import and prophecies and heroes, what we redestined know. It had to be hot fantasy that fucks. The word-of-mouth narrative around the show quickly devolved into a message of, see how Game of Thrones subverts fantasy expectations. Because we've never read a fantasy book besides Lord of the Rings before. See, this isn't your wide-eyed Brotherhood of Man, too much hugging and forehead-kissing fantasy for nerds. This is hardcore, violent, darkly cynical, titty-besotted fantasy. Hot fantasy that fucks. They re-gods for Bessie, and they re-tits. Game of Thrones also came about at the dawn of what has become to be known as the Golden Age of television. The dough, we could go on for a while as to the validity of this label, but for now, let's just take for granted that, yeah, sure, this is the golden age of television. Here we are. This is it. What does that mean? Broadly, The golden age of television is marked by a period of serialized prestige drama that debatably began with The Sopranos and has now become an oversaturated market with not only cable and premium channels, i.e. Bo and Showtime, but with streaming venues themselves less encumbered with budgetary constraints like Amazon and Netflix, not only piggybacking off of the success of premium cable, but sometimes outshining it. We've hit a period of oversaturation that is referred to by some as peak. And while that might lead to some truly excellent, polished, high-budget art that we've genuinely never seen before, the push for networks is more to become the next big thing. So when you're rewriting your series, novel, comic, whatever, there are broadly two ways you can go about it. You know the ending, or you don't. Breaking Bad is widely considered to have one of the best, most coherent, most satisfying finales in all of prestige television. To satisfiedly pursue the one and aims of the have so According to creator Vince Gilligan, it was designed to be closed-ended and not have even the possibility of going on indefinitely. It's really incumbent upon us to bring it to as satisfying a conclusion as possible, and the only way we'll have a chance at doing that is to know exactly when it is that we're going to end, and also to have that ending not be too far off in the future. On the other side of the coin, you have shows like Dexter and Lost, where the showrunners had no endgame plan, and Lost is perhaps the most emblematic of the problem of a concept with no endgame in mind. J.J. Abrams is infamous for his mystery box approach to storytelling. That presenting an audience with a tantalizing mystery, let's say about someone's mysterious parentage from a family they'll be back, is a great way to keep them engaged, whether you know the solution to that mystery or not. But planned finales can also create problems. Box writer Emily Vanderwerf wrote about the danger of planned finales in the wake of Game of Thrones. She points to Breaking Bad as an example of a show that found a way to thread the needle of planned finale with the organic storytelling that comes with television. And after Gilligan and company meticulously plotted season 2, they more or less plotted the rest of the show on the fly. According to Vanderwerf, this is the paradox of you'd think that having a satisfying ending would require having a rock-solid plan to get to that ending, but the opposite is often true, because the more you know about how a story's going to play out in the macro, the more the micro just becomes a series of items checked off a list. Knowing the goal you are working towards is great, but only if you leave room for the fact that characters and their relationships can change during the life of a show, even if you totally know where the show is going. So with Game of Thrones, that was a benefit and a handicap. The showrunners knew where they were going, even if the actors didn't. Jon says open as well, already filling with tears. For a moment neither moves, as if moving will make this real. We see Jon with his hands still on the hilt of the dagger he just lodged in Dany's heart. Her strength leaves her and she collapses to the marble. He keeps her in his arms and she falls, and then raises his sword to strike. But something is hurtling toward him out of the dark. Oh, my lord, best of my men, breaker of chains and mother of dragons. Our queen's nature is fire and blood. Standing before the Iron Throne, Dany steps forward and kids plunge their knives into him. He takes more punishment than Hodor took at the door, Then Berwick took in the grave. And in broad strokes, I don't doubt that where Dan ended up was where Martin intended to go. However, they create big problems in that taking shortcuts, making character changes, and cutting certain characters and subplots altogether, they've written a different story to the one that Martin wrote. Their characters are different characters than the ones Martin was writing. Circe is different, Daenerys is different, Tyrion is way different. Damn you, Peter Dinklage, for just being so ding-dang-dong charismatic and handsome. You re-talking to Oking. And now we struck Oking. Did my hand fall from me wrist? I will remember you. But we can't make him the bad guy. Who cares if he strangled his lover in a jealous rage? Or in self-defense, as it is in the show? I guess that's what we re-going with. I am sorry. Ye. See, the way this arc played out was a red flag. This scene makes no sense, given how both Tyrion and Shay evolved away from their characterization in the book. I am yours and you are mine, while still getting their book ending. So the showrunners were given a destination, but when the show they wrote and the characters they created kind of went in directions that did not work with that predetermined destination, or at least we're going to have to take a very different way to get there. Who cares? Let stow it anyway. So no discussion about prestige television is complete without a talk about The Sopranos, and this will spoil how The Sopranos ends. So fair warning. You know, I still have people asking me, what the hell was that last episode? The Sopranos begin the era of prestige television drama in earnest. Like Game of Thrones, it was a massive critical darling and commercial success out of the gate. So, like Game of Thrones, when The Sopranos ended after 6 seasons, there was a lot of build-up for how it would end. Would one of Tony's many enemies gun him down? Would he slaughter all of his enemies in some Pyrrhic victory? How would his relationship with Dr. Melfi play out? Would he walk away from the life altogether? We get answers to some of these questions. Dr. Melfi cuts him off when she realizes Tony is a lost cause, and Tony does not walk away from the life. The final scene in the show takes place at a diner where Tony is scheduled to meet his family for a regular dinner. Carmela shows up. His daughter has some difficulty parking. Shit. But then we notice that several of the other patrons in the diner are acting kind of suspicious and giving Tony the side eye. Journey's Dante Stop believing increases in volume to the point that it's almost overwhelming. There's this really dissonant, dark, comedic tone. The scene is building and building in tension, and then building and building in tension. It cuts to black, and that is the end of The Sopranos. And as with Game of Thrones 12 years later, people lost their shit. It made a lot of people angry. Creator David Chase knew how it was going to end for a while, saying no one was trying to be audacious. Honest to God, we did what we thought we had to do. No one was trying to blow people's minds or thinking, whoa, this will piss them off. People get the impression that you trying to fuck with them, and it's not true. I actually really like the ending of The Sopranos. I think it works both thematically and dramatically. Tony might have died in the moment it cut to black, or he may just have had a boring dinner. But as long as he's stuck in that life, he'll always be living on Ocknife's edge. Would I have done anything differently with the ending of the show? I don't think so. But The Sopranos set the stage for memorable endings. And another lesson was learned here. The wrong one, in me opinion. A memorable, even controversial ending, Dante Stop is the same as a good one. Fan service also merits discussion here, because fans in recent years have had a much more active role in shaping media. Typically, the longer a thing goes, the more fan service gets jammed in to keep people engaged. And not all fan service is bad. One of the positive changes from the books is the fight between Brienne and the Hound in season 4. You read the wrong one to watch over her. And that's what you read doing. Watching over her. That's what I'm doing. In the book, the Hound goes down from blood poisoning from a stupid wound he gets in a bar fight. But in the show, you have two characters you both care about fighting over Arya to the death. Like, I want them both to be no. No, my children. I'm screaming. So, cleganebowl. Let the dogs out. Hoot, 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 hoot. I'm not at night. You real talker. Listening to talkers makes me thirsty. 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 At best, cleganebowl was a fan theory that combined both book and lore, a lot of internet meme culture, and the burning desire to see this giant man kick the ass of this other giant man in a revenge fight so epic that it would rock the foundations of Westeros itself. You know who's coming for you. You've always known. Get hyped. See, the Hound looks the way he does and is afraid of fire because his brother, the Mountain, shoved his face into a fire when they were kids. And ever since then, he's wanted him some revenge for that and some other things. All about that revenge. Just really, really hates that Mountain that rides. Hates him. My brother, alive. Hates him, the Hound. We come across me brother. Maybe we can both cross a name off a list. Wants revenge. And while, yeah, the meme itself was a lot of fun and we got hype and everything, as a dramatic plot point, it's, it's really fucking dumb. One, not only is the Mountain functionally dead by this point, like, Oberyn Martell killed him and what we have now is basically just a mindless zombie that does whatever Cersei says. But two, the books make it pretty clear that Sandor is finally at peace with himself and his need for revenge. If the gods are real, why haven't they punished him? They have. Revenge being mistaken for justice is a big thing in the books and we will get to that later. His arc wasn't about getting revenge. It was about moving past that. In the show, you can still help a lot more than you've harmed Clegane. It's not too late for you. Never too late to stop robbing people, to stop killing people. Start helping people. Never too late to come back. You know who's coming for you. You've always known. Who is forcing you to do this? He's like a zombie. He's dead. He's a shell. He's a zombie. Cleganebowl happens while Daenerys is doing some war crimes and King's Landing is burning. They re-fighting for nothing. The Hound has long since moved on. This has not been his motivation for a while. Gregor is an empty zombie shell and the world is ending outside and everyone here is about to die anyway, so who cares? The Hound isn't even fighting for Arya. He's not protecting anyone. And look at me. Look at me. You want to be like him. You two rode 1,000 miles on horseback together and you only now decide to have this conversation. Go home, girl. The fire will get her. The one who lit the Thraki. Also, Arya murdered all of House Lord Life Alert and baked them into peas and fed them to their father. I'm pretty sure her revenge quest is shot the moon in comparison to yours, sir. I am not, sir. So Cleganebowl had no reason to exist other than the concept becoming mimetic on a god tier level. Yeah, that's you. That's what you've always been. But I use but you won't be you. How do you like me now? Fucking D. Fan service also comes with the double-edged sword of, in this case, the show's self-imposed burden of needing to be smarter than the fans, which becomes harder and harder in a world with massive subreddits dedicated to theorizing about the thing in incredible detail. So somewhere along the line, subverting expectations stopped being a thing one did because it benefited the story and more a thing one did because, well, subvert some way more often the way and so I have a wine along this is we hoped to kind of avoid the expected. She seemed like the best candidate provided we weren't thinking about her in that moment. This isn't necessarily unique to Game of Thrones. Westworld creator and showrunner Jonathan Nolan admitted that an episode from season 2 had to be rewritten after Reddit fans guessed a major coming twist. Reddit has already figured out the third episode twist, said Nolan. So we rechanging that right now. It's annoying sometimes when people give us the twists and then blog about it. You can't complain when people are that engaged, he added. It's a very gratifying, but stop doing it, please. I can't help but think that fans should be allowed to, like, gather in groups online and theorize and have fun without networks, like watching in and going, oh no, they figured us out. We'd better go change the show because we only exist to outsmart Reddit. Like, you don't have to be unexpected for the sake of being unexpected, but when your show is kind of known for that, you don't, but way, which to be a way, the we hope to kind of avoid the expected. These people have guessed the secret that I'm going to reveal in Book 6. People have already guessed that here and Book 2 is just out. You really have two choices there. You can ignore it and proceed with your plan, despite the fact that some people know where you're going. Or you can get all panicky and say, oh me God, they figured it out. Then, way, with it, away, oh, yeah, I can't let that be. I'll have to change it. I'll have to go in a different direction. And I think some writers do that, and I think that's always a mistake. You know, if you've planned your book that the butler did it, and then you read on the internet someone has figured out that the butler did it, and you suddenly change in midstream and it was the chambermaid who did it, then you screw up the whole book. So I'm not saying that David Benioff and D. Weiss were writing the show with the intention of both indulging in fan service while also avoiding correct fan theories. I am just saying this culture inevitably influences and infiltrates the writing of a show that was already handicapping itself by limiting its runtime for no reason, except that you really over the show that made you famous, and you got a Star War you need to go ruin. I mean make. Why is it ending? Oh, I don't know. Ask Dave and Dan when they come through. We could have gone to 11, 12, 13 seasons, but, oh, they argue as they wanted a life. The journalist who reported that quote from Benioff diplomatically described his reaction to it as frustrated. In hindsight, that's a bit of an understatement, seeing as any thematic coherence in the series fell apart after Martin stopped being actively involved in the production after, wouldn't you know, Season 4. What are the odds? But to me, it betrays a certain lack of curiosity on the part of Benioff and Weiss, and it makes me wonder why are they even dedicating their lives to storytelling if they are so uninterested in themes, especially given that they adapted a book that was so heavy with them. What unites people? Armies. Gold. Stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Yeah, so this series functionally ends with these two chuckle fucks like fetishizing storytellers as the most important people to ever exist. But yeah, themes are for 8th grade book reports. We want to avoid the expected because that means it's bad. Okay. And who has a better story than Bran the Broken? So you might be asking, did you really just spend 45 minutes winging? I am not winging. Your lips are moving and you re-complaining about something. That's swinging. And you didn't even get into any specifics. Yep. Oh yeah. We got about 10,000 words worth of our winging. That's swinging. In our Google Doc before we realized that this is gonna be two-parter. Yep, it's two-parter. Sorry. And this part is the sponsored part. Are you interested in thematic coherence? Do you have a book report you need to write? Are you in the 8th grade? Don't have time to read A Song of Ice and Fire? Well, why not listen to it using Audible? Audible members now get more than ever before. Members choose 3 titles every month, own audiobook plus 2 Audible originals that you can't hear anywhere else. Members also have unlimited access to more than 100 audio-guided fitness and meditation programs. I love those. And you might be like, Game of Thrones is 33 hours long. And that's a lot. To which I say the first book I recommended for Audible was Disney War, and that sucker is 3 hours longer. And it's also 33 shorter if you listen to at 1.5x speed like I do. Right now, I'm listening to the Hugo nominees for Best Novel. If you didn't hear, Angelina and I are actually nominated for a Hugo this year for our Hobbit duology. Hey, I might get to meet George or Martin at his Loser's party. Oh no. I'm going to let best-selling author John Green deliver the rural information for how you could start listening with a 30-day trial, and your first audiobook is free. You can go to audible.com/Lindsay Ellis. That's audible.com/Lindsay Ellis to get your first audiobook free or text Lindsay Ellis to 500 minus 500. That's Lindsay with an I, Ellis with an E, and an I, Tool and Ans, to 500 minus 500 and get your first audiobook free. I'm glad they let me keep the same loan. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? I'm not a kite. You rea talker. Listening to talkers makes me thirsty. 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 You rea talker.